you could get tenure in racism. It was a thing. I just got tenure in racism. Woo! So that now we have, I just got tenure in DEI. It's the same thing.
Boy, oh boy, it is going to be an interesting episode. Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Hope you all had a great weekend. I was able to catch up on quite a few of the committee hearings that have been taking place over the past week or so, and one of them in particular I want to focus on a little bit, as well as some of the other news that happened over the weekend. So without further ado, let's dive into the news. So this past Friday, we heard that Mark Carney is going to be returning to the U.S. on Tuesday, tomorrow, to meet with Donald Trump for the second time since he became prime minister. And with this, we've also heard that there's some sources saying we could potentially be seeing a reduction in the tariffs that are hitting certain sectors the hardest. But we also know that Trump is trying to implement new tariffs on softwood lumber and wooden products like furniture, cabinets, vanities to be implemented on October 14th. Now, with all this information, you would hope that Carney returns with a deal so that Canada isn't getting hurt as much as it has been, but the mainstream media is already trying to program and condition you to not expect a deal to be made and that you should be okay with that. Take a listen to this.
Just in closing, how important is it for Prime Minister Mark Carney to come back from this specific trip, his second down to the White House in 6 months, with a win, something that he can present to Canadians as proof that he has gotten something done?
I don't think it's important at all. Quite frankly, I think it would be a mistake to set that up as the litmus test of the trip. The fact that he's going to the White House, meeting with the president, the fact that they will once again have a chance to establish and reinforce their personal chemistry, that quite frankly is win enough. And if he can come back with some concessions in several areas in response to some concessions that Canada's made, I think that really represents bonus and gravy. But just the fact that the two leaders seem to respect each other and are talking, I think that's a win for our country.
Now, I'm sorry, but I don't think the almost 70,000 individuals who have lost their job because of the tariff situation are going to think it's all gravy that Mark Carney and Donald Trump are reigniting this chemistry because they respect each other and aren't able to talk. I don't really think that's going to fly. This guy needs to be coming back with a deal. And a lot of the comments are saying, well, no deal is better than a bad deal. We are currently getting hit with 50 to 60% tariffs. Getting any sort of deal to reduce that is better than no deal, than leaving it status quo. And I'm happy to hear that some of the sources are saying that we could potentially be seeing a reduction in those tariffs for those main sectors. But to kind of throw this out there being like, hey, we don't really need a deal. He doesn't need to come back. It shouldn't be the litmus test. As long as they're talking and they respect each other, that's all that matters. Like, you got to be out of your mind to put that on air and think that just because he's the former ambassador to Canada, US, that you should take anything this guy has to say with a grain of salt. It just doesn't make any sense. And even Kathleen Monk, who, again, I'm not a fan of, she lays it out flat, says the exact same thing, that Carney needs to come back with some sort of 232 reduction in the tariffs because our workers are getting destroyed.
If I look back over the past 3 months, let's say in the lead up to that August the 1st deadline and since, there has been no effort on the part of the federal government to set that context publicly facing. There has been, and I understand the impetus around not negotiating in public, not disclosing all the details of what's been happening behind the scenes. But even this week, the reason we found out that Prime Minister Carney and President Trump had spoken is because a reporter shouted a question on the way into, I think it was caucus, and the Prime Minister said, yes, we've spoken. And then when, how, why, none of those questions were answered. There was some testimony from Dominic LeBlanc, Minister LeBlanc, this week before a committee that again indicated a deal wasn't dead. But other than that, we know nothing about what's happened over the past few months.
Yeah, it could either be what Scott just outlined, which is just a great confidence in the Prime Minister to solve this as the CEO of Canada, and they have overwhelming and maybe naive confidence in his ability to settle this deal, or they're just hunkering down, and the PMO is just hunkering down and can't actually or doesn't want to put out what the litmus test for this trip will be. I mean, surely one of the ideal scenarios would be a de-escalation of the 232 tariffs, some kind of pause or rollback, or at least a period period in which they could kind of further debate them. Just this past week on September 30th, they slapped another 10% on softwood lumber. I mean, that will have an impact on direct workers, on mills across Canada. I'm with Corey that I don't have a lot of faith that will actually happen, but that is one of the venues in terms of applying pressure for Trump to actually take a pause and a beat on these 232 tariffs that are damaging, our economy so greatly and hurting workers particularly.
No, I completely agree with everything that Kathleen said there, but the problem is this is what people voted for. They saw Carney and they said, yeah, banker CEO, let's put him in that position of power. But that's exactly how he's treating this role, like a CEO. He does not care about the workers, us Canadians. He's just benefiting from all the profits in the US. He's heavily invested in the US. The guy is not transparent whatsoever. He jet sets wherever he wants, but then comes back and talks to us about being net zero and carbon capture and doing green projects. I mean, this past week, we've heard from the Enbridge CEO because of the whole Alberta BC pipeline, and they keep questioning him. Are you guys a proponent? Because we keep hearing there's no proponents. And he's explicitly said, how can I be a proponent if the government continues to put all these stipulations and blockages? And do you think Carney has done anything to reverse them? No. Yet now the Enbridge CEO came out again with another kind of press conference. I forget where he was, talking about how this right now is our time to shine. This next 10 years could be our golden age, unlike the last 10 years that we've just squandered.
Canadians, practical as ever, are asking straightforward questions. Will we have the courage to take advantage of this moment? Will we once again build and prosper? Or will we miss the opportunity again? Today I stand before you again, and I'll put it plainly. We can't walk anymore. We need to run and fast. The last 10 years have been a competitiveness disaster for Canada. But the next 10 can be a renaissance. If we choose to lead, this is our second chance. One doesn't often get second chances. And it's a better opportunity than it was before. But it comes with much higher stakes and less time to take action. I believe we can build. I believe we can compete. I believe we can win. But winning requires decisions, urgent, confident, investable decisions. Decisions that will lead Canada to becoming the best place in the world to build energy, infrastructure, and critical resource projects that fuel jobs and growth right across our entire economy.
Now, I don't know about you, but to me, that definitely sounds like Enbridge is willing to be a proponent of a pipeline if a lot of the red tape gets out of the way. But the Liberal government is not going to do that. Tim Hodgson, he just announced that they're going to be investing more into EV battery plants when we just had all that nonsense with Lion Electric as well as a Northvolt going under. EV batteries is not the way to go, in my opinion, as well as them virtue signaling with all this DEI stuff. These are the main priorities that they have. They just put out this video about the October being Women's History Month. And in the video of the Women's Caucus, there's a man standing in the background. Now, by the time this video comes out, I'm not sure if that clip will even have any audio because copyright is a hell of a thing. But this is what the Liberal government is focused on. They're more focused on this performative, DEI, optic, virtue signaling type thing than actually helping Canadians. And this ideology is spreading like wildfire. I mean, the main story from David Moose on the Loose's video yesterday was about this workout place in Halifax, I believe it was, who has two different prices, a price for white people and a price for non-white people. Well, there's been an update. I'm guessing the place has been bombarded with calls and complaints because it looks like if you go to the passes section, they've now removed the BIPOC one, this one of the persons of color. They've now removed it. However, if you go to their work with us, the job applications, they still have, we prioritize individuals who identify as part of a BIPOC or LGBTQ plus community. And if you tell them which ones you are, you probably have a better chance of getting a job. And these committee hearings that I'm going to show you dive into this and how this is a bad mentality to have. But there's been other sources that places like Table Salt here has a clip from Dalhousie University talking about how they encourage applications from Indigenous people, Black people, members of the LGBTQ, racialized, disabled, women, all this kind of stuff. Basically, white men who are heterosexual are not allowed to apply. And it says that if you don't fall under one of those categories and are looking to still qualify for one of these positions, you need to demonstrate that you are substantially better qualified for the position than somebody else that just has one of those, falls under one of those categories. This is not the way that we should be doing things. And it goes as far as Table Salt even posting this, which was in David's video as well. People indicating that they're she, her, that they are European settlers, they have thin privilege. This person says they're from a Tamil diaspora, second generational settler. Like, you really need to be screwing up the individuals that are in these programs, these universities, to be writing this stuff or willing to be writing this stuff. And in these committees, a lot of these professors, they go against the liberal narrative. Just take a look at this.
There has been institutional capture by leftist ideologues who represent maybe 10% of Canada, and probably 90% disagree. Not just conservatives, probably liberals, centrists. Most people disagree. Most scientists disagree, but they don't want to say anything. They're afraid to say anything for losing funding, like myself or Jeff.
As I said, I think if you're not free to speak, that has an impact that emanates out into the culture of science, so that people just tend to be hesitant. It makes you diminished. It makes you less experimental. You don't take risks. You just sit back and become small and just do some derivative work so you don't make waves, and hopefully you can just kind of be relatively, keep your head down and get through. That's increasingly the culture of science in Canada.
So what those two gentlemen just said there shouldn't be that much of a surprise to people, because if you've been following along with the higher education dogma, this ideology is quite prevalent. It's like a liberal hive mind that goes on in these universities and colleges. But the conservatives are trying to fight back. Now, Jamil Javani and Ned Couric put out this tweet saying, "Let's go." The Restore the North campus tour kicks off on October 14th, and they're going to be going to a few university campuses here in Ontario. And I don't know if they're going to be doing like a Charlie Kirk type style or Steven Crowder, where they sit down and talk to you, or they're just actually going to be having they're on a podium or a stage and they're just talking to the audience, and the audience can sit there and listen. I'm not quite sure how it's going to work, but it looks like they're trying to maybe get the youth back, because as of lately, DEI has been going away. A lot of people are changing it, but now they're switching it to EDI, I think, to kind of give it a different flair. But they keep talking about this in this committee hearing. The professors keep shutting them down.
Over these two past committee meetings, we have heard from various professionals and scholars of how beneficial EDI has been at ensuring all Canadians are on a fair playing field. Throughout your time in academia, what possible negative consequences over EDI have you witnessed?
Negative consequences of EDI have been legion. I mean, I expressed some of them there, but I can provide more. For example, my department was awarded what's called an Inclusive Excellence Program. Now, this is an Orwellian term that just means we're going to restrict it to certain limited groups. It's not including, it's excluding, and you're limiting the applicant pool severely. So here's what happened. Our university decided that in the wake of 2021, they wanted to hire 6 Black scholars and 6 Indigenous scholars. Our department was awarded one of the positions for an Indigenous scholar. Upon hearing this, a colleague of mine from outside the department related to me that they knew of a really good postdoc in the United States who was black, and it would be really good to get this person to apply. Of course, I had to tell my colleague that this person is excluded because they have the wrong skin color. This is the in and out daily experience of EDI policies. They're discriminatory, exclusionary, and I see no good in them. They're dark.
So if we stop this progress by giving resources to people who are less qualified, and it is absolutely necessarily the case that when you use DEI, you are discriminating.
Now, most of us know that academia has been riddled with this, but not having all this DEI or diversity of thought is also a huge problem, which the next professor is going to explain a bit of. But we also saw this just recently with Jimmy Kimmel losing his job, getting it back, all that stuff. They did a deep dive onto how even the media presents the left and the right. Jimmy Kimmel, or a lot of these shows, 40 jokes about Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, and Gavin Newsom together. Look how many they did about Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and Pete Hegseth. And then when you go down, look at just the guests that they've had. In terms of liberal guests versus conservative guests, 14 total conservative guests, 511 liberal or Democratic guests. You are literally in an echo chamber at that point. And I'm not saying it has to be 1 for 1, but you didn't even break 100 or 50. You're at 14 there. And they talk about this for our media, all these political pundits who are on these shows. They skew one way. Take a listen to this.
What our main finding was that the federal research and funding agencies are ignoring the most important and most significant diversity problem in higher education, and that problem relates to viewpoint diversity. It might seem that this could be a partisan statement, but I want to emphasize that this is just an accurate description based on the data. Our survey found that when one looks at professors' voting patterns based on the 2021 election, fully 76% of professors voted for the NDP or the Liberal Party. Only 7.6% voted for the Conservative Party. When we asked professors their self-reported political beliefs, fully 88% identified as being on the left. This is, of course, significantly different from the wider population, and I want to suggest to the committee that if the results, if the skew on this kind of issue was similar for really any other metric of diversity, it would be considered a national crisis. I want to live in a world where there's a high public trust in higher education and universities and to allow us to do our work. But I think we all know that public trust is eroding in a series of institutions from media to various claims of expertise. And the point of the testimony that I'm offering to you today is that while I don't want there to be a lack of public trust, I can sympathize and see why there is a lack of public trust, especially in the population of, say, 41% of the population who voted for the Conservative Party in the last election. As they listen to experts who show up in the Globe and Mail or the CBC or wherever, tell them that there's a consensus on topic X or topic Y, pick your topic, what they can know is that the expertise is just not made up of a diverse array of people that represents their viewpoints. So if I could just take 1 second to say, another witness mentioned that, in, say, business schools or engineering schools, the implication, I think, that this wasn't a problem. Our survey specifically looked at that, and I would say we expected that to be the case, but what we found is that it was not a significant difference, that the politically skewed universities might vary slightly depending on the discipline, but it is, as I said, 88% of a representative sample of professors from across the country identify as on the left.
And that's why we need to get rid of this DEI, EDI, whatever the hell they want to call it at this point, because it's not inclusive, it's exclusive, but we're seeing it in jobs, we're seeing it in schools, we're seeing it in the media. Like, everything is leaning left, and it's just infecting people to the point where it could potentially radicalize a lot of them. But with that being said, I'd love to hear from you guys. Let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. If you can, like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. It really does help the channel grow. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.